What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today.
What's cracking? Back with another one from the amazing channel that puts out very entertaining content called Scat Attack. This one is the true king of the NBA's most difficult era regarding Kobe being Bryant as opposed to what many people think LeBron James dominated after his rookie season. I hear a lot of people say that. They're like, by year 2 or year 3, LeBron James was the best player in the league and has dominated the league ever since. I'm like, what? Oh my gosh. Now these are points that I have made plenty of content addressing and debunking all these lies and false narratives. So I'm glad that Scap Attack is going to attack this himself and shed some light on this situation, because I've been saying it for a long time. I was like, no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Kobe Bryant is the only player with 5 championships in the first 10 years of the 2000s. Kobe has 5. He has half the championships from the year 2000 to the year 2010. 1999 2000 season to the 2009 2010 season. Kobe has 5 chips. Shaq has 4. Tim Duncan has 3 during that time period. Kobe won 3 in a row, and then he went back to back with Pau Gasol and them boys. Like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Anyway, I could go on for a long time dispelling all these myths, but I'm going to shut up and we're going to see what Scap Attack has to say and build off these premises. Let's get into it.
In December of 1891, James Naismith hung a peach basket at the International Young Men's Christian Association Training School in Springfield, Massachusetts. And in the roughly 130 years that would follow, the sport of basketball has grown into a fixture on the global sporting stage, with its highest peak reaching in America's National Basketball Association, the place where now countless millions of aspiring athletes from every continent on this planet dream to one day add their chapter in the book of legends, to etch their bust amongst the other immortals that have ruled this sport. But the sport itself, the style, the pace, and its rules have changed drastically through the years since Dr. Naismith first hung that peach basket. While the NBA reaches back as early as the 1940s, the modern era began in 1976 when the ABA and the NBA merged to form the current league as we know it. There have been various other rules changes along the way that have shaped the style of basketball being played today in the National Basketball Association, an era of which is commonly believed to be the best, most difficult time to play professional basketball at the highest level. An era which has ignorant stooges on every corner of the internet, all the way up to prominent basketball analysts lamenting the superiority of today's game, while diminishing other eras and relegating pass grades to the likes of plumbers.
Oh, well, he was being guarded by plumbers and firemen.
But which era actually was the most difficult? When you look at the young decade that we currently reside in of the 2020s, it's actually trending to be one of the easiest decades to play in all of league history. One of the most wide open, offensively, statistically inflated eras ever. And that dates back all the way into the 1960s, which was the most fast-paced, highest-scoring decade we have ever seen, with nightly scoring averages swelling into the mid-1 teens. From the decade of 1960 to 1969, averages were 115 points per game. This era famously produced Wilt Chamberlain and his gaudy scoring explosions, which reached a peak in 1962 when he averaged 50 points per game for an entire season. The rapid pace of play and meteoric nightly scoring averages lead many to question the validity of or outright dismiss many of the accomplishments that era produced. Yet, those similar questions are never raised about today's NBA, where nightly scoring reached nearly 115 points per game in the most recent 2022-2023 season. And many things pertaining to sports debates, theories, and takes are generally actually just people's individual preferences. It is fundamentally impossible to unequivocally determine opinion-based topics like what era had the most physically imposing or athletically gifted players in it. That's why commentary about plumber eras or anything else based on someone's eye test is undeniably insane and galactically stupid.
Galactically stupid!
While your eyes lie, numbers and their context seldom do. And we are smack dab in the heart of the easiest era to play in and stack statistics in since that 1960s decade. And in the 1970s, scoring would start its decade-long descent, down from 115 points per game in the 60s to just 108 points in the 70s.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm pausing right there. So I've been on the record, actually. Sometimes numbers do lie. Sometimes. I just think everything should be put in context. Give it a good observation from a numbers perspective, from a research perspective, from an eye test. Bring it all together, all these different avenues of evaluation, and bring it all back and put it all together and tell me, what does this mean to the best of your ability? So I don't necessarily disagree with him. But yeah, I know Kobe's era. Like, it was like the average points per game was like under 100, and in his earlier years up into, like, you know, his first handful of years in the league, maybe even his first 10 years or so. I'd have to go back and look at it, but the game was ugly. It was a defensive league. Not many scorers could get off outside the most prolific scorers in the NBA, and the league thought the game was ugly and it was too mucky. So they started implementing rule changes over the years to prioritize offense over defense and raise the scoring up to give the customer a more entertaining product. But I guess that's to most people, most casual viewers, and I don't mean casual in a bad sense, they prefer to see the ball go in the rim. But you got some people like me, I like to see a good defensive, grinded out, post, slow paced game with different teams with different styles going against each other. I like to see that. That's my preference. So for me, I thought the game was more beautiful and entertaining back when the scoring was lower. Anyhow, sorry to interrupt.
But in 1979, the course of NBA history would forever be changed when the three-point line was added in. Scoring would see a slight uptick through the 1980s, jumping up a point per game for that decade up to 109.3 per night. Once we hit the 90s, however, the style of basketball would change. The league would shift to a much slower paced, lower scoring, and defensively oriented game. For the decade, scoring averages dropped to just 101.3 points per game. Despite average nightly scoring plummeting 8 full points per game from the previous decade, Michael Jordan was still able to average 30 points per game and win a championship in literally every single year he started and played a full season throughout the decade.
Kobe had to deal with his own defenses.
To dwindling scoring amid the ferocious defensive trends of the 90s, the NBA would implement a number of rules changes. Most notably, hand checking was outlawed officially. in 2004, and illegal zoning rules were abolished in 2001. Despite the NBA taking measures to try to promote a more offensive game, in the decade of 2000 to 2010, scoring dropped precipitously, down to 96.9 points per game on average, which is easily, by far and away, the lowest scoring decade in modern NBA history. Not only were points per game at its lowest, nightly possessions and pace of play were drastically less than in any other decade. Assists per game were the lowest ever. Field goal percentage was also at an all-time low.
That's a point I keep making to people. Oh, yeah, Kobe shot 45%. First of all, the difference between 45 and 50% is usually one shot, depending on your volume. But usually 1 to 1.5 shots is the difference between 45 and 50%. Second, tell me another player in those early 2000s, especially, another prolific all-star caliber swing player that was shooting field goal percentage at a 49 plus 50% clip. I'm waiting. Apparently Kobe was the only inefficient player ever, if that's what you're considering inefficient. Ray Allen was inefficient, if you're calling that inefficient by your standards. Tracy McGrady was inefficient. Paul Pierce was inefficient. Show me the swing player that was shooting 49, 50% during that time. I'm waiting. I dare somebody call Ray Allen inefficient. I'm waiting. Fact of the matter is, it was a different era. It was muck it up. It was grindy. It was slow. Only the most elite of the elite could get off with regularity as far as scoring. And a 45% field goal percentage, a 45 plus, was generally considered good back then. I'm just saying, man.
This was the dead ball era.
The only players that were shooting like 50% plus from the field were centers and sometimes power forwards during that era. I'm talking prolific. Don't send a role player at me saying, well, this role player was a shooting guard and he shot 50% from the field on 4 or 5 shots a game with no attention. Don't play that game.
Of NBA basketball, and yet it produced one of the most offensively dominant players in NBA history. During this decade, Kobe Bryant led every player in total points scored with 21,550. To put that number in context, look no further than the NBA's all-time scoring king, LeBron James, who won his first league MVP in 2008-2009 season at the age of 24. Over the course of the decade that would follow, James's absolute prime 10 years, he scored 20,349 total points, well over 1,000 fewer points than Bryant scored during the decade of the 2000s. Kobe would also lead this decade in points per game, averaging 28.5 for the decade, a decade that included LeBron James and Dwayne Wade for 7 years, Allen Iverson and Shaquille O'Neal for the entire 10-year span, and a young Kevin Durant. And again, speaking of LeBron and looking at his best
Tim Duncan,
10-year
Vince
span
Carter,
of time, he averaged 27.2 points per game, or over a full point fewer than Bryant did during the 2000s. And one of the major knocks on Kobe as a scorer, a point for which he is routinely diminished, is for his perceived lack of efficiency. But that perception is a product of the era and time in which Bryant was unfortunate enough to play in. Again, we are talking about a decade of prime for Bryant, that had league-wide scoring averages of 96.9 per game, nearly 20 points per game fewer than the most recent season. Kobe shot 45.6% from the field over this span of time, while league averages during this decade was just 44.9%. Average effective field goal percentage during that 10-year span for the league was 48.6, and Bryant had an effective field goal percentage of 48.9 over that time. Kobe actually exhibited above average efficiency in the era that he played in. During this decade span from 2000 to 2010, Bryant made 8 All-NBA first teams, 1 second team, and 1 third team. And speaking of this being the greatest defensive era in history, Kobe made 7 All-NBA defensive first teams and 2 second teams during this decade. He would also win 4 of his 5 career NBA championships in this 10-year span, while appearing in 6 of the 10 finals. Kobe Bryant.
Okay, so depending on how you look at it, I guess since his first championship was started in 99 and ended in the year 2000, then based on that, then yeah, 4 instead of 5, because technically it started in 1999. It didn't start in 2000, but acquired the championship in the year 2000. So depending on how you look at it.
Bryant dominated this era like no other player, and like few other players ever have in any of the other eras in NBA history. During the decade that would follow, from 2010 to 2020, scoring would steadily increase and jump about 5 points per game higher on average to just over 102 points per game, as the rules changes that were implemented in the early 2000s finally started to yield the league the offensive fruits they were looking for. And in the first 3 years thus far of the 2020s, we have swelled all the way to over 112 points per game, as pace, court spacing, and primarily three-point shooting are at all-time historic rates. It makes sense that as we get further away from certain eras in history, they become less memorable, and perhaps we get to a point where large portions of a fan base weren't even alive to experience it in the first place. But in this current generation, we have become more prisoners of the moment than ever before, indicative of a petulant feeling of superiority that everything you are experiencing or seeing now must be the biggest, best, and greatest ever. But despite whatever your lying eyes might tell you, Kobe Bryant dominated an era of basketball without equal, and he represents one of the very few on a list of players who were the greatest to ever do it. And chances are his name is on a list even shorter than you care to admit.
Yup. No lies there by Scap Attack. All facts, all absolute. And this isn't anything new for me. I have been saying this for years and years and years. You can go through content, my Kobe Bryant playlist of me debunking all this BS efficiency nonsense that I keep hearing about Kobe being Bryant. Blows my mind. It's like, if you're calling Kobe Bryant inefficient, you're calling damn near everybody else at his position inefficient as well. But apparently he's the only guy getting labeled with this. It blows my mind. Crazy. Not to mention, I could tell you for a handful of years in those 2000s, near the latter end, Kobe Bryant always played through. That was the other thing. This guy always played through a plethora of injuries and was still operating at peak efficiency most nights. But then even towards the end of those 2010s, have you seen, y'all seen Larry Bird's finger? Messed up finger that played with his entire career. Larry's shooting would have been even better had he not messed up his finger. Kobe Bryant had a mangled finger as well on his shooting hand. Not as bad as Larry's, but he went through breaks, dislocations, finger lacerations, all on his shooting hand, and missed little to no time and just played through it with this big-ass bandage on his finger and went on to win championships with a bad finger on his shooting hand. Never complained about it. Never brought it up. Never used it as an excuse when things didn't go his way. He wasn't cut from that type of cloth. That's the type of cloth LeBron James is cut from. Kobe Bryant always took accountability. Always did. And at the end of the day, he was always looking forward to the next game, to the next goal. I don't give a damn what people think about me. I'm going to play my game. All I'm focused on is playing basketball. Cut from a different cloth, man. Kill the noise, man. Kill the noise. Kill it. And I'll be the first to tell you, did Kobe Bryant have bad shooting games? Did he have abysmal shooting games and he kept shooting? Yep, he did. Those existed. I'll be the first to tell you. I was yelling at my TV screen, Kobe, stop shooting. But Kobe's mentality was, once I've stopped shooting, I've already defeated myself. He always believed that the next shot was always going in, and sometimes it did. Sometimes he'd start off slow as hell, and he'd shoot himself back in the game and end up having, throwing in 40, 50 points in the second half of a game and turned into a virtuoso performance. Hey, man, you live by the sword, you die by the sword sometimes. But that was his mentality. It is a different outlook than what some people have in those situations. It is what it is. Can you live with the criticisms, and can you live and bear the burden of responsibility if your plan doesn't go your way and you end up losing? If you can accept that and grow from it and continue to progress with no problems, then good on you. But some people can't. Anyway, that's all I got to say about it, man, because I could go on for hours and just throwing information out at you, debunking all these myths. But if you go on my Kobe Bryant playlist, you'll see more content of me addressing all this stuff here. All right? Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and I'll catch you on the next one. We out, baby.